Welcome everyone to today's Kernel of Knowledge session from the Greater Midwest region of the National Network of Libraries of Medicine. As I mentioned, you are all automatically muted upon entry. Please use the chat function to ask questions or make comments. For those of you not familiar with the Greater Midwest region, we're located at the University of Iowa, hence the Kernel of Corn in our Kernel of Knowledge series. We will be posting this recording on the National Network of Libraries of Medicine YouTube page for future viewing or reference within the next 2 weeks. This webinar does provide one CE credit from the Medical Library Association, and I will send the link to that with the recording. I want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Bobby Newman, and I'm the Community Engagement and Outreach Specialist with the Greater Midwest region. I connect with the libraries in our 10-state region and across the country. Like many of you, I am working from home right now, so please forgive me if you hear my dog barking in the background suddenly. We'll get to our panelists in a moment, but really quickly, for those of you not familiar with the National Library of Medicine, you may have seen these acronyms around, and we'll do a little introduction to them. The National Institutes of Health is the nation's leading medical research agency. Many of you might be more familiar with the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases right now. It's one of the many institutes and centers at NIH. The National Library of Medicine is also an institute at NIH, and it is the world's largest biomedical library, which maintains and makes available a vast print collection and produces electronic information resources such as PubMed and Medline Plus. NNLM is the National Network of Libraries of Medicine and is an outreach program of NLM. It is made up of 8 geographical regions, and the Greater Midwest region is one of those regions. So we have an exciting presentation for you today, so I want to go ahead and get started. Kaetrena Davis Kendrick is the incoming dean at Ida Jane Dacus Library and Louise Pettis Archives and Special Collections at Winthrop University. She's also the co-editor of the Small and Rural Academic Library, Leveraging Resources and Overcoming Limitations. And in 2019, she was named the Association of College and Research Libraries Academic Research Librarian of the Year. So Kaetrena, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. Sharing. It's still saying that it's disabled. Let's see.
Try now. I think I needed to update.
All right, thank you so much. There it is. I appreciate it.
I apologize.
Thank you. Good afternoon, morning, everyone, depending on what time zone you're coming to us today. My name is Kaetrena Davis Kendrick, and I'll be talking with you about my latest survey, which I've been gathering data since mid-March, and I talked about it at the LibRep conference early last month, and today I'm going to share with you the latest data after talking last month. So I'm really happy that I'm with you today, so let's get started. Today I'm going to review with you, I always go over the low morale experience just to get everybody up to speed. So I'm going to review with you the results of the original low morale study and share associated frameworks and summarize the development of a low morale experience before I then introduce you to the COVID-19 low morale data. And then we'll discuss and share countermeasures to low morale, and I'll talk about my ongoing research. I don't think this is, unfortunately, it's not going away, but I'm hoping that we can reduce or eradicate it through the countermeasures and my ongoing research. And when I say countermeasures, I not only mean the things that I find in the data, but also things that people have shared that have helped them, so we can come to some sense of as large a pool of best practices that we can. So I always perceive my discussions about low morale and self-preservation, all those things are ongoing discussions. So even though I am sharing data as the person who's doing the research, I really encourage you to have a conversation not only with each other, but also with me. So I'm very close to the data and would like to see it improve. So low morale historically covers issues of respect in the workplace, feelings of respect in the workplace. They often cover people feeling they are not recognized for their work at work. Unclear expectations. Perhaps you have a nebulous or unclear job role. Even informal, like your job is written down, is still nebulous and unclear, or moves about something, very unclear language. Leadership problems, and that usually stems from poor communication, no communication, wishy-washy communication, radio silence, and also from organizational changes, perhaps reductions in force, changes in leadership, rapid changes in leadership, and that could be at the top levels or even in managerial levels. So organizational changes, and also that also includes structural changes. So maybe the department has grown or expanded. So that's what we historically think of when we think about low morale, and that is what the literature says. But what we know now experientially is that low morale is the result of repeated and protracted exposure to verbal, emotional, verbal, written, and system abuse and negligence in the workplace. And every time I give this definition, I want to be clear that it includes abuse, those clear areas of abuse, and it also includes this unclear, insidious, nebulous, obtuse area of negligence. So when I was going through the data in these studies, particularly in the original study, I recognized that people were very clear on the types of abuse, direct abuse, that they were experiencing. But as I was going through the data, I realized, oh, there's this negligence going on. They weren't perceiving it as negligence, but I saw through the data that there was this negligence going on. So I wanted you to be clear that that negligence is a form of abuse. Okay. There are other links to low morale that you've probably seen in the literature for a long time. Talk about incivility and toxicity in libraries, bullying and mobbing in libraries. And then I'll share with you, we'll go into these frameworks. You've probably been hearing about resilience narratives, vocational awe, and now as we've continued, particularly now in the pandemic, things about job precarity or precarious labor in our libraries. These things they've been talked about somewhat, or they're growing now, but they definitely have links to the low morale experience. So let's talk about some frameworks. So the first one I want to talk about is something called resilience narratives. Perhaps you've been told this, and not just within the pandemic lately, but perhaps you've been told this even before the pandemic. Do more with less. Lean in. Get gritty. You have to have grit. So you'll probably hear that. Those are like the touchstone colloquialisms surrounding resilience narratives. Resilience narratives stress individualism. It makes individuals feel responsible for or take responsibility for systemic problems, organizational and structural problems. So it stresses individualism. It also, within that individualism comes a feeling of isolation, okay, that I'm doing it by myself. Resilience narrative also depoliticize structures. So it makes a person feel, makes individuals feel, or it also states from the organizational level, so the organization is the one touting the resilience narrative, right? It says, everybody responds to chaos and less than and confusion and whatever those things are, whatever those system gaps are, everyone should respond the same no matter what. So that's where the idea of grit comes in, that if you can't stand and can't deal with all the chaos and confusion and less than, it's because you don't have enough grit, because you should respond and step up like everybody else who may be quote unquote stepping up is doing. And if you're not stepping up, you just can't hang, right? So it makes it feel like everyone should respond to these things the same way. And they come to work the same way with the same outcome and reserve of energy. It also normalizes insecurity. So if you've been told that you're doing more with less, and or you've been stepping up to the challenge of doing more with less, by the way, you can't. But if you feel like you're successfully doing more with less, you start to begin to feel like it's normal that we have less to work with. It is normal that the system cannot provide the things I need to do my job, because they're asking me to do this job. All these things are normal. It's normal. All these insecurities. Job precarity is normal. Not having PPE is normal. Not having things in place is normal because I'm just stepping up, I'm just supposed to step up. Right? So it normalizes insecurity. Generally, already marginalized groups are most susceptible and vulnerable to the resilience narrative. So think of any group that we know is already marginalized in our society and our profession. They're going to be even more vulnerable when it comes to resilience narratives. So the next framework is vocational awe. You've probably heard about it, and I'm always happy to talk about this because it's such an excellent framework from which we can view the lens of low morale. Fobazi Attar coined and created this concept in 2018. She defines low morale as the idea that libraries as institutions are inherently good. It assumes that some or all core aspects of the profession are beyond critique, and it in turn underpins many librarians' sense of identity and emotional investment in the profession. So you can perceive that if we consider that our work is a vocation and all the mythological ideas we have about not only what librarians do, but how we perceive ourselves. You can perceive how that plays into overwork, issues of shame, weaponizing our values against other people who call out problematic issues of librarianship and practice. And that happens not only within our profession, but say a campus administrator may come to you about a stereotype. Let's say someone's abusing you and someone says, well, librarians don't fight. All y'all do is, y'all just quiet in the library. How y'all fighting? Y'all don't even talk. You know, things like that. So think about ideas about vocational awe, about issues of service, what that means to serve, what we mean when we say we want to help people, what does that really mean? And sometimes we can't define it, so we end up doing all the things under the guise of helping people. So let's talk about the low morale experience. Low morale development starts with a trigger event. It is generally unexpected. It identifies coworkers as an abuser. And you know, previously you had a positive or neutral interaction with your coworker, and now it becomes negative because of this trigger event. When you have this trigger event, there are short-term emotional and physiological effects, and in short order, fight or flight is what people experience. The most common term is I felt blindsided, I was thrown under the bus, and emotional outcomes are confusion, shock, anger, and then fear, because now they're wondering if it's going to happen again. Am I in trouble? Am I going to lose my job? A trigger event is different from a bad day at work. Bad days at work, like you have a general disagreement with a colleague, that will resolve itself within a week or so, right? You'll go back to your positive and neutral relationship. A trigger event, when someone talks about that experience, the low morale experience, they'll go back to this event every time, even if the subsequent instances of abuse and neglect come from other players. When they think about when it started, the trigger event will always be the same. And then so after that trigger event, there's repeated, protracted abuse and neglect exposure. So that's where we have the emotional, verbal, written system, negligence, categories of abuse. And public librarians now also report physical abuse. So that's the new group that I'm working with now. They're the only group to, so far, report physical abuse as a part of their experience commonality. When we're going through the low morale part, that's when you have intense emotional, physiological, and most importantly, cognitive responses. So behavior starts changing. And then you start thinking, instead of, I don't want to work at this place, you start thinking, do I want to be in librarianship? Do I want to continue to be a librarian? Do I want to stay in the profession? So that's when we start looking at. So it goes to the trigger event, then moves to the continuum of this happens, and then this person did this to me, and then that group did that, then I got a new dean, but they just still didn't do so-and-so, and then I got a new campus administrator, and then my colleague did this to me, and so on and so forth, okay? So that's the repeated, protracted exposure to abuse and neglect. When we talk about those cognitive responses, there are two ways that people respond generally. One is coping strategies. Coping strategies are conscious or unconscious and positive or negative behaviors that victims engage in to reduce the impact of their low morale experience. These actions do not affect the abusers and do not affect the trajectory. So you start going to yoga because you feel that helps you deal with the stress of whatever's going on. But your yoga practice does not stop your abuser from micromanaging you. You start overeating as a result of of a person calling you out of your name or doing some sort of microaggression against you every day. But that overeating does not stop that person microaggressing against you. So they're positive or negative, conscious or unconscious. They may help you feel better about what's happening, but they don't impact anything at work, anything what the abuser's doing, and that particular trajectory, except that you might feel better some sort of way to help you deal with it. The other thing that people do is mitigation methods. Mitigation methods are conscious, deliberate behaviors that victims perform to resolve or end their experiences. These methods directly impact abusers or the organization and address or engage enabling systems. So the most popular mitigation method is that people start looking for other jobs. Okay? That's the most popular one. Some people go to HR, all right? We'll talk about that as an enabling system. Can you think of other mitigation methods? One unusual mitigation method is something called job ushering, where for whatever reason, the abuser will ask the victim to give them a reference for another job. And the victim will give that abuser a great job reference in the hopes that the abuser leaves the institution, right? So that's one of the more unusual mitigation methods. So when you have these questions, how do these abusers keep going to other libraries? There you have it. There are impact factors that affect low morale experience development. Impact factors are issues or events that influence every stage of the low morale experience, and they include enabling systems, which are individual behaviors or organizational cultures, structures, policies, or ethoses that inadvertently enforce or underpin low morale experiences. And enabling systems, the word enabling systems is something, if you are familiar with substance overuse circles, and they call a person an enabler. A person who's an enabler is a person who's engaging in a behavior that they hope will help the substance overuser stop or reduce their use. But what that person is actually doing is prolonging or intensifying the ability of the person to abuse the substance or overuse the substance, right? So enabling systems kind of work in the same way. There are systems that should stop abuse and neglect in workplaces, but they inadvertently expand or prolong this trajectory at work. So impact factors include insidiousness and contagion. Insidiousness just means that low morale experiences develop slowly. And because they develop slowly, people don't have the opportunity to defend themselves as quickly as they would. And that goes back to ideas of vocational awe. So what happens is the first time somebody abuses you, you might say, oh, that person didn't mean to do that. That's not what librarians do. Librarians are nice. And we don't treat each other like that. All right. So insidiousness means that it's slow developing. You just wake up one day and you realize this is what it is. And the other thing is contagion. Contagion is you realize that other people in your workplace are being neglected or abused, or you begin neglecting or abusing other people in your workplace as a result of what you're dealing with, right? Enabling systems include promotion and tenure. These are the ones from the 2017 study. There are lots more, and I invite you to go read the studies for additional enabling systems for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and public librarians. These are just the ones just from the study. There are more if you work in certain areas and or you have a certain identity. The enabling systems for academic librarians, however, are promotion and tenure, human resources limitations, staffing and employment, perceptions of libraries and librarianship, leadership, and uncertainty and mistrust. And I want to stress to you that those other ones that I talked about, so those groups are additional. So except for promotion and tenure, these also show up for public librarians and people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And the other ones are just additional, so they're even more for other groups. So I want to be clear. There's these, and then there are more. And like I said, except for the public librarians, or except for promotion and tenure, everything shows up for all the other groups as well. Recovery is long-term and unresolved, and it has physical and mental health implications. So you might be thinking, if I can just get out, if you are currently dealing with a low morale experience and or you have left a low morale experience, you might have thought, if I can just get another job, then everything will be better. However, if you have hypertension as a result of your low morale experience, just because you go to another job does not mean that all of a sudden you have to take your medication anymore. If you developed clinical depression or it worsened, or you have anxiety, that anxiety and that clinical depression just doesn't stop just because you go to another job. And just because you started feeling, perhaps you were going through emotional abuse, verbal abuse, written abuse, years or months of people talking poorly to you, treating you poorly. If you go to the new job, you don't just say, oh, I was a good librarian all that time. It takes a while for you to get your confidence back up. So that's why it's long-term and unresolved. When I would talk to people during this study, when I would be gathering data, at the end of the data, at the end of the interview, they might mention to me, oh, this happened over 20 years ago. But the passion and the level of detail that they remembered, it was as if it happened, like they were still going through it, basically. Okay, so the level of detail. So those memories are crystallized in their mind, and the resulting feelings are crystallized in their bodies. So they still feel it in their bodies too. Low morale impacts on practice. We have reduced collegiality, reduced professional confidence, as I just mentioned, increased procrastination, increased tardiness and absenteeism, reduced professional engagement, poor decision-making, not only as terms of what you're doing for your work, but how when we interact with our library users. So now we're going into issues of ethics. And when we talk about increased tardiness and absenteeism, you start seeing things like time stealing. Like, so people would say, I just couldn't fathom going back to work, so I would come in late, or I would take a longer lunch than I was supposed to. Okay, so these are issues of ethics now that come into play when we talk about the impacts on practice. In terms of workplace culture, some of the markers of a low morale organization, you see people working in silos. You see people being isolated, whether they're deciding to do it on their own or someone is isolating them as a point of abuse and neglect. You see bullying and you see retaliation, and that bullying includes mobbing. So mobbing is the next step from bullying. So it's incivility and toxicity, bullying, and then mobbing, and then, straight up workplace violence, where you see actual violence happening, physical violence happening in the workplace. And that's just a continuum. You can go to the Workplace Bullying Institute to learn more about that continuum. You see insularity, so people don't want new people coming in. So that's where you see things like cronyism come into play, thinking about good fit instead of competency. And that's the other thing. People desire fit over competence. They desire friendliness over competency, over collegiality. They desire, or you see competition versus development. People competing against each other instead of helping each other develop. You see high turnover, policy inconsistencies, and training gaps. In terms of health, I already mentioned hypertension. I already mentioned anxiety and depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. If you have previous diagnosed mental and physical health conditions, all those conditions will be exacerbated and augmented by a low morale experience. So now let's talk about the COVID-19 survey. I started this in March of this year, as I said earlier, and I'm just continuing to gather data. So if you have not yet participated in the study and you are currently going through a low morale experience, like you were going through it before the pandemic started, that's who I'm looking for. I want to hear from people who perceive that they were already dealing with low morale before the pandemic. So that's who these participants are. They're currently facing low morale even before their experience, and now it's continuing through this pandemic. So these are the participants I've had as of earlier this week. At some point, I just had to stop and get the data out for you all. So earlier this week, I had 273 participants in this study that had responded. 84% women are people who identify as women, female, 69% Caucasian, 35% are new librarians and archivists. So go ahead and think about retention and advancement. Okay, this is a retention issue. And it was about equitably split, and it was only a few ticks, but the new librarians and archivists just edged out by a couple of percent. That's concerning, and it's been like this basically every time. It's been holding at the same thing, so most of the people are still holding at new librarians and archivists. This is a retention issue and a recruitment issue. 62% work in academic libraries. So if there are public librarians out there, about, I'm getting an inch in public librarians and other librarians, but that's where we are right now in terms of demographics. For general library responses to COVID-19, 61% said that their campuses stopped all face-to-face classes, and that 59% of administrators have canceled all library programs and events. But we see that big drop, a little bit of a drop when it comes to how we other ways we interact with people, even if the library is canceled all of its events, and even if our campuses aren't having people come on campus, we see a drop when it comes to what our libraries are doing to encourage social distancing. So only 38% reduced the library hours, only 38% of administrators curtailed in-person library services, only about a third, just under a third of administrators have stopped all in-person library services. So even though the events might be canceled, there's a high number of that. People have still been coming into libraries. So that's concerning. If you want to learn more about academic library closings, Hinchliffe and both Eisenberg from Ithaca SNR are running data. So take a look at that, and that's real-time data. So people who are going through low morale say that they have experienced upticks in these types of abuse. So negligence has jumped to 78%. And I started looking at BIPOC. So BIPOC again means Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So you'll see those data for that group as well, right, in comparison to the larger group. System abuse, all right? So this makes sense. So and how that negligence is playing out is, my supervisor isn't telling me anything. No one is telling us what to do. The policies aren't clear. Even with the recognition that the data is changing immensely from day to day, like the data is new data every day. So like I live in the state of South Carolina, and every day we get I just go find out the reports of how many new COVID cases there are. And so they get that data too, and the new models are showing up for all the administrators. So, but the problem is, even with that data, no one's telling, other people feel like no one's saying anything. So a lot of the feelings of negligence are, right when we started, no one was saying what we were going to do, how the decisions were coming to, who was staying in the library, who was not staying in the library. And then the system abuse. So even though I'm doing these things according to policy, they're being upended by administrators, right? Or I'm going to HR to find out, and HR doesn't have a plan. Or when I complain, I get fussed at. So that's the sort of system abuse, because I'm supposed to be able to say what's going on. So this group perceives that their abusers are mostly library administrators at 72%, BIPOC at 2/3 of their group, supervisors and managers, and then campus administrators, right? The most, so I asked, let's say, which of the enabling systems do you find yourself coming into contact with during this experience? Uncertainty and mistrust, by far the highest, which makes sense, because that comes from I don't know what's going on. No one's telling me anything. And then I get told things, but then I hear the opposite, but no one's telling me what the mechanism for the backtracking is, right? Leadership is always a top one, because information generally comes from leaders. So there's that. And I want to be clear here. I need to start saying this even more. I think people need to be recognize that leaders also deal with low morale. It does, it doesn't excuse whatever abuse or negligence is happening, but I think it's really important for me to say that leaders, and I've started saying this a couple of, several times now, and I want to say it again here, leaders also have or deal with or experience low morale. Remember, they're in the middle. They're in the middle too. We often perceive as only quote unquote middle managers in the middle, but administrators are also in the middle, particularly in libraries, because they are between provosts and presidents and their direct reports in the organization. So keep that in mind. But that being said, leadership is an enabling system, and leaders are generally the ones who are perceived as perpetuating abuse and neglect in the workplace. Staffing and employment, of course, this is playing out in the COVID-19 pandemic too, as we see reductions in force, furloughs going on, but being asked to offer services at the same level. Public libraries are furloughing people, but they're still asked to do curbside service and do all these other things with less staff, less people, less employment. And think about how the resilience narrative plays out there. We should just lean in because, we gotta, these decisions are seemingly being made at the expense of our colleagues. So people will perceive that we do all the things anyway. So that's that. Human resources limitations. People are asking human resources what their rights are. Or they go on with their complaints and there's no clear recourse there. And then library and LIS perceptions, which go back to leaning into things like, we're supposed to be doing all the things and we still have to do the things at the same level. And if we don't, that means we're not helping people and we have to do these things or else, something might happen to the library. So that's how that plays out. In terms of health impacts, there are increases in mental and physical health concerns, but it's only a small number, but I share them here because I want people to know that people who are having physical health concerns should be acknowledged. And those health concerns in terms of physical feelings are weight gain, asthma, migraines, and then just unoriginating exhaustion. I call it a feeling of general malaise, or physical malaise, not knowing where it's coming from, but just don't feel good. And no one is saying that they have been diagnosed with COVID, I think, but they're just saying they just don't feel good. They just do not feel good in their bodies. But when you look at mental health impacts, you see the jump of the mental health concerns, right? So anxiety, stress, and everybody just said anxiety and stress. So it's just these feelings generally of anxiety and stress and depression and fear. So we're talking about people are fearful. And imagine what decisions we make when we are fearful. We do not make good humans, do not make good decisions when we are fearful. You don't. In terms of values in LIS, we talked about them earlier, resilience narrative. So I say, have you been exposed to these events as you've been dealing with COVID-19 and dealing with your low morale experience? So 77% of the group say, yes, I've experienced being told to lean in, to do more with less, to have grit, to resolve, to have a unending reserve of energy in which to do my work, even though all these things, this chaos is going on. 71% say they have been exposed to vocational awe, which is generally, again, the weaponization of values and expectations and mythologies and stereotypes against you when you're trying to actually get work done that will help, that will either protect yourself or protect prioritize your health or actually the long-term health of an organization. 72% say they are experiencing burnout, and 42% say that they're experiencing job precarity. I presume that if people continue to engage with this survey, that number will go up incrementally as we move forward, as our organizations make their value judgments, where their judgments with who should get money and who should be supported financially. So let's talk about countermeasures. And here's where I want you to be thinking about all the things I've just shared with you, but also if you have gone through the experience, what has helped you. So these countermeasures are coming from the data that I've been collecting as people have been talking to me. And then, but most of that data is anecdotal. So let's go through them. One, assertive communication. Assertive communication, I've learned that librarians, and this is way before I started this research, librarians generally have concerns and issues and worries and cannot do this. So I encourage you to do what you can to learn about assertive communication. There are lots of books out there. One is called Crucial Conversations, the Gentle Art of Verbal Defense. So those are some things that will help you understand and engage with assertive communication, which is basically, I'm going to retain my dignity and I'm going to protect the person with whom I'm engaging, their dignity, and we're going to come to a resolution, whether it's positive or negative for either party, that we walk away with dignity intact. So, but librarians generally are really, really concerned about, well, what will so-and-so, what will the board of trustees say if I have to tell them something that I don't want to tell them, but that they have to hear? What I have to tell this patron this policy, and I'm really worried about them not liking me. They'll think librarians are mean. That's really, try to move those things out. If you have assertive communication skills, you don't have to worry about these things because your goal is to make sure that you get the message out. And I always like to say, you know, Brene Brown says, unclear is unkind, clear is kind. I also want to tell you that you can be a leader. That title that I am walking into in July will be my first formal leadership title. And I also perceive that I've been leading my previous institution's library. And my previous institution's library before that, I was a leader. I just didn't have a title. So you can be a leader without a title. And that means because you can lead without a title, you can set the standard regardless of what you do in your library, regardless of what your job title says. You can lead and set the standard of what you want your library to be and how you want people to act and how you want people to engage with you. You can do that today, right now. You can lead yourself. Boundaries. Again, boundaries. Boundaries are interesting because they have emotional pitfalls in that, you know, the idea here is you feel like mean and selfish because all of a sudden you're saying no. Because the idea here is, well, I've been allowing it all this, why are you doing different now? And that is also what people who are resistant to your boundaries will say to you. This is where you practice self-compassion. You will mess up as you figure out what your boundaries are. So be compassionate with yourself. And once you know those boundaries, stick to them as best you can. And also be flexible with yourself. Maybe one day you realize that the boundary is actually too inflexible because A, B, and C. Change it if you need to, but as long as it preserves you. Also, I want you to recognize the role of shame. I want to be clear to you that shame plays a role in the low morale experience. Perhaps if you've gone through this experience, you feel shame because you weren't able to defend yourself. And perhaps because your leader, the person who was abusing you, I guaranteed, if they're abusive, there's something they are hiding that they are also ashamed of. And there are shame screens that are enacted. And you can look at Brene Brown's book, I Thought It Was Me. I thought it was just me, but it isn't. And she talks about shame screens. So there's shame in this experience, and it plays out in how you react, how you respond, and how you move forward in your experiences. You've been probably hearing a lot about self-care in libraries, and that's great. And I think we should be caring about ourselves in all those ways that self-care means. And you don't have to spend money to take care of yourself, okay? However, and also, there is no self to take care of if you do not preserve yourself. So I want you to start thinking about self-preservation. And self-preservation is the set of tools you have in a moment. In a moment where abuse and neglect is happening, you can get those tools and use them so you can preserve yourself. Also, professional development and continuing education. When we are in low morale experiences, you want to isolate. You don't want to engage. But this is the time for you to engage. So at the very minimum, you know for a fact, because you work on that committee outside of the library, that you are in fact good at X. And you know for a fact, I took that class, so whenever I'm ready to move forward in my job search, I know for a fact I can do X, Y, and Z. to apply for that job. So professional development and continuing education. Abusers want you to be silent. Abusers want you to be paralyzed. And that way they retain their power and continue doing whatever it is they're doing. They are hoping that you remain silent and do nothing, and that they can control you. Even if that's not how they're thinking about it, that is what is happening. They may not be thinking of it that way, but that is what is happening. So call out values and work weaponization. Call it out. You might have to call it in. You might have to take someone to a corner and talk about it. Or in a meeting when someone microaggresses, you say, Joe, that's not what we talk about here. We don't use that language here. I don't tolerate that here. Why are we talking like that? This is an issue of moral courage. Someone's abusing you and neglecting you. So it feels there might be consequences, but you'll be alive and healthy. We need more safe online and community spaces to talk about this. I've created some, but make sure that if people want to talk about it, you make a safe space. You can do that as a leader, regardless of your title. Regardless, you can do that as an informal leader. Perhaps you can think of other things too that I've shared. Maybe this list has sparked something in you that you think will work. Please, please share it. My work is ongoing. I don't foresee that I'll ever stop. As busy as I probably will be at my next position, I will likely find a way to continue this work because it is important. And my new position will also form a different aspect of these issues that I'll be looking into, I am very sure. So my current study that I'm about, I hope to get ready to look at this data. I'm looking at how people decide to leave low morale experiences, or what that experience of leaving looks like. My public librarian study has been accepted for publication, and I hope that it will be coming out this year. My racial and ethnic minority academic librarian study was published late last year. I did that with Ione T. Damasco out of the University of Dayton. And then, of course, my original study from 2017 is published in the Journal of Library Administration. Please go take a look. I'm always taking data. You can give me all these things where I'm asking for data for spot checks and strategies and de-authentication. Share your story, job hunting during low morale experiences. That's just a general study, a general survey finding out what people are doing. It's separate from my formal study on leaving low morale experiences. All those links lead you to anonymous data gathering, so you don't have to tell me anything about you per se. I don't want to hear any identifying information, but if you want to just generally say what's been going on for you, please engage with those portals of data collection. I also have a Facebook community. It's called Renewers. If you're on Facebook, just do that search and it should pop up. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at those call signs. And I have a website called Renewals where I just tell y'all what's going on, what I'm doing, how my research is being used in the field. And when I can, I do renewal seminars and renewal workshops. So if you're interested in working with me on that, I'd be happy to talk with the organization. I'm looking forward to taking your questions. These are the works cited that are here. I look forward to hearing from you. Again, I see this as a discussion, not, although we call it presenting, I really see it as a discussion.
Thank you so much, Kaetrena. Really appreciate it. I've got a couple questions I've saved, so I'll ask those to give everybody else a chance to get theirs typed into the chat box.
Right.
Some pretty simple ones. A couple people asked about the recording. Yes, this is being recorded. I will email it out to everyone who is registered once we get it processed. That takes 1 to 2 weeks, depending on how things are going. And so you'll have that and you'll be able to share that with other people. Several people asked if you were willing to share your slides.
Yeah, I'll create them as a PDF and you're welcome to them.
Okay.
I'll send them to Bobby so she can.
So I will include that with the same time I send out the recording so as not to barrage you with emails. Okay, so let's get down into some of the questions about your content. One of the first questions was, when staff cannot identify the trigger event, what are techniques for addressing the conflict and abuse? Do the techniques change in these cases? Sorry.
So when they can't, So if you're not, there is a trigger event. You probably is just so salient. It seems normal, right? So you don't have to recognize a trigger event to know that you're going through abuse and neglect. So this is just, my data is a result of a common experience from the people that I heard from. If you don't go through a trigger event, does that mean that someone's not abusing you? Absolutely not. So I wouldn't be worrying about, oh, we can't identify a trigger event, so what should we do? The better thing for you to do would be to identify what types of abuse are happening, regardless of when you realize it's happening or not. And once you realize what sorts of abuse is happening, then you can figure out what your response is going to be.
Okay, great. In your survey, I think is there just one survey, or have you done more than one surveys? I know there's more than one publication.
I've done more than one publication, but this is the only survey I'm doing for COVID-19.
Okay. In this survey, are participants educated about the definition of low morale? The questioner says, I don't think I realized what I was going through until this presentation, so I might have responded very differently to a survey prior to this.
What was the question though?
Are you defining what low morale is at the beginning of the survey? So,
well, I do at the beginning, yes. So if you do it, I put that low morale is the result of repeated protracted exposure.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's, I think.
I try to identify it so people know what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Or what the data says it is.
Right, yeah. So
it's the data.
Okay, what are the strategies for calling out abuse when the administrators are the abusers and people are concerned about retaliation and the impact it may have on future upward mobility?
So I always want to say this, if you're afraid, so again, this is an issue of moral courage. If it's an issue of moral courage, this is what moral courage is. The very definition of moral courage is something negative may happen to you.
Yeah.
But you're being abused and neglected. So don't be concerned. I mean, you can be concerned about it. Yes. That's a part of this experience. I am concerned I might be retaliated against. But someone is abusing you. You are telling someone to keep abusing you. And so that's where fear is. And I figure, and from my continuous engagement with this data and people who are dealing with experience, and by the way, I am not immune to low morale. Okay. Figure out how you're going to show up for yourself, no matter what, rather than being concerned overly about the control that something that someone may or may not do to you. Figure out how you're going to show up for yourself, no matter what. This is the issue of moral courage. So I hear you. There's a video on calling in versus calling out. So perhaps you call in first. Perhaps you call in first. Take that person to the side and say, are you aware that your actions are, not you, your actions. So this is where the assertive communication comes in. This is where all the things we talked about in those countermeasures come into one huge, crystallization bowl. You can use assertive communication. Did you know that when you I had a document, by the way. And even if I recognize that for some people, documentation of these events is a re-traumatizing event, but as you can, if you can, write down what's happening to you. So because I see it as a sort of method of self-care, because people think, oh, it's not really happening, or oh, that was just an isolated event, or oh, they start emotionalizing for the other person. Well, I know that John is going through a divorce, and so therefore I realize I can understand why he blah, blah, blah. All those things. But the documentation will help you realize, oh, this is happening. And oftentimes it's cyclical. A lot of people in my data, when they say they were being targeted or abused, they could predict when it was their turn again. They could predict it. It's my turn. They're coming for me in a minute. So that's what the contagion is. I saw they fussed at Cheryl on the floor. So I guess in about 2 weeks I'll get you know, berated in the faculty meeting. The faculty meeting coming up, that's my turn. Write it down. And then you decide whether you're going to call them in or call them out. Maybe you just go to human resource and say, can you set up this meeting for me? You know, but somebody's abusing you. How are you going to show up for yourself? Because we spend a lot of energy thinking about what someone else may or may not do. But I know this for sure, the Workplace Bullying Institute, if you engage with that bullying tale, they don't like it. And maybe you talk to your colleagues and y'all do a group thing and you all go together. But as long as no one says anything, it will continue. It will continue. That's my answer. And it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. But is your life easy right now with the abuse and neglect? Is your life easy? That's a question for you to answer. And I know this sounds kind of harsh, but I want you to be concerned about how you're going to show up for yourself, no matter what.
Someone wants to know if you have done any workshops with leadership, and if so, what have been their responses?
I have not yet, but I don't think that well, I haven't done anything with leadership right now. I think that's because I'm continuing my data and I just started offering workshops and things like that. Administrators are contacting me to have things on their campus, so that's encouraging. And again, I want to stress, leaders also go through low morale, and they are probably concerned. They are dealing with leaders that have talked to me have often told me that they are dealing with previous leadership and the poor relationships that the previous leaders had with campus leaders, okay? So they're dealing with that and trying to figure out how they're gonna move forward. So leaders are beginning to contact me, but it's not like this. It's not as near the deluge as, you know, people who are not quote unquote formal leaders contacting me and saying these things are going on. I want you to be clear, and I'm saying this not only as a person who's about to be in a leadership position, but a person who just has been talking with leaders. We have to remember that leaders can't tell us everything. I think the lesson there is we should tell people what we can, and the issue is always that they're not saying anything. And so my goal will be, if I can, this is like going into the presidency and then you realize, oh, maybe I can't do. But for right now, with my ignorance, my goal will be to say as much as I can without saying anything that I can't, but not leaving people hanging. So that's what I say about leaders. I don't think that just because they're not contacting me at a certain level does not mean that they're not concerned. I would think that'd be a disservice to our to formal leaders, period.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we have another question. It seems like vocational awe and resilience narratives and causes of the low morale experience are intimately connected to white supremacy culture, even though low morale impacts library workers of all races. Mm-hmm. Do you think that anti-racism work in our organizations might be helpful to prevent these forms of abuse and neglect?
Yes, because so for the enabling systems for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, they have several more, like they got 12 or 14 right now, additional enabling systems. And of those additional enabling systems, 4 of them have to deal with race. So diversity, rhetoric, racism, whiteness, white supremacy. And then the other one is oppressed group behavior, which also comes out, but had threads of white supremacy. That, you know, white people in their profession, in their workplace, let's say I'm doing something and it's going well, and you don't have anything to do with it, you're not interested in this area of study, but then you still come after me because I'm being successful. So that jealousy, sabotage, but it comes out also because they have more experience than me in the profession. So oppressed group behavior comes out of the nursing field, but BIPOC so far have been the only ones to say they're coming after me because I'm newer and I'm being successful, okay? So the answer unequivocally is yes, and anti-racism would definitely inform even more how our colleagues, our Black, Indigenous, me, have been treated, are being treated, and you can read lots of ethnologies about it. Dr. Cook has written 2, Dr. Nicole A. Cook has written 2, Dr. Amelia Ann Gibson has talked about the use of the weaponization of civility. We talk, and me and Donna Lanclos have had a thread about being library nice. We so busy being nice, want to seem nice, that we can't be professional with our colleagues. We privilege friendliness over competence in this profession. And as an African American woman, how that plays out is if I'm focused on my work and I don't want to go out after hours, then I'm not friendly. But I'm in fact slaying my work in the profession. But because I don't want to go out for a drink, that means I'm not friendly, and therefore I'm not a good librarian. So we have issues with that, and that informs anti-racism and social justice. And you can go right now and look at the Black and the Ivory Twitter feed, off Twitter thread on Twitter, and read all about the instances that people are of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are microaggressed, sabotaged, marginalized, verbally beaten, all kinds of things in 2020. So yes. Thank you for your question.
We have a lot of work to do.
We have, Caucasian librarians.
And that's who I'm speaking for when I say we.
Caucasian librarians had a lot of work to do. It needs to go beyond gathering information. It needs to go beyond empathizing with Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and to action, and beware and open. And again, this is where assertive community, these things that I'm talking about for countermeasures will help you in all these areas. Be assertive, be willing to say, I don't know, but don't put the labor on your BIPOC colleagues. Go read, we're librarians, go get it. Go get it and find out. And if you gotta ask me a question, ask me an informed question instead of saying, what can I do? Go read, we're all librarians. So that means we can find things.
And there are a lot of lists out there.
And this action will help everyone. So there's a myth about racism that if you help me, if I do this, if Caucasians, generally, I'm from the South, and so there's a little thing where, we don't have a lot of things in the South because the majority culture is so busy holding BIPOC down that no one gets anything. We don't have health care because they don't want to legislate it because of who might get it, instead of making sure that everybody has it, which includes Caucasian people. So this is the same kind of mentality that occurs. Librarianship is a microcosm of the larger society we live in. And so great, do your lib, guys, which I'm co-locating, great, but put it into action and know you're gonna mess up. You're gonna mess up, but it'll be better. Because now you're
apologizing sincerely. Okay,
this all connects to low morale, by the way, so I'm not going off here. I'm not going off the track as far as I'm concerned for me.
Not as far as I'm concerned either. As if that matters. I appreciate the countermeasures that you've offered, but do you have suggestions for how to address systemic issues related to low morale? It has become clear to me that this is endemic to the profession.
Yeah, so again, when I talked about that leadership aspect, are you looking at policies in your profession? Are you looking at policies in your organization? I guarantee you there aren't any. What happens? And you can work with human resources so you can create something. You can work with your academic librarians. I guarantee you that your grievance procedure, so promotion and tenure is an enabling system, because what happens is the people who are tenured will say, you should so-and-so. It's like, this emotional abuse that if you don't do this, we might not give you tenure, right? Excuse me, that is emotional abuse, right? Or in some cases, sometimes depending on what people say, verbal abuse or system abuse. That's system abuse too. So I guarantee you, if you go to your faculty organization manual, there's nothing discussing that. If you talk with faculty organizations, say, can we discuss this and make this a policy, a part of our grievance procedure or reporting venue? So when someone is feeling intimidated by a tenured faculty member, it can be reported. So you can start policies. You can just treat people better. How about this? Let's say you work in a particularly tenuous organization where no one's even saying good morning to each other. Good morning. Maybe you start with, basic courtesies. And it's not gonna, regardless of what you do, it's not gonna happen overnight. You're not gonna wake up saying good morning for 30 days. And then in 30 days, you'll have no low morale. But what you might have is people saying, good morning, good morning. That's something. Then you say, good morning. Well, how was your weekend? Oh, that was really great. I saw your so-and-so. I saw what you did on that. I saw your keynote. I saw your blah, blah. That was really great. I got a question about that. That was really interesting. Now we got a conversation. What? So it's not going to change overnight. It'll be a long time. But even then you start working on the policies, right? Because people are more open to it because now you can say good morning to them.
Yep. All right, we are at 1 minute left, and I apologize to the people who have questions we didn't get to. I'm going to do my quick wrap up that I sort of have to do as the facilitator. So sort of what next? If you're not a member of the National Network of Libraries of Medicine, please consider joining. Membership is institutional, not individual, and it is not just for health science or medical libraries. Benefits include being able to apply for funding for health-related projects, including improving employee health and well-being in your library. You can register for additional classes and webinars, which are all free at nlm.gov/training. Just a reminder that you will receive an email within 1 to 2 weeks as soon as the video is processed with the recording. It will also include a link to a survey to provide feedback on the webinar. And then for those of you who need CE or would like CE or a certificate of completion, you can claim that as well. This gives a 1 hour of continuing education credit from the Medical Library Association. With that, we are at 12 o'clock. I want to thank Kaetrena so much for her time and her expertise and being willing to share it with us today. It's greatly appreciated. And everyone who came out to attend.
Thank you, everyone. You can contact me anytime off list. If I didn't get to your question, just send it to me. I'll answer it. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great day and take care of yourselves. You are most important. You. Take care.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the National Network of Libraries of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel. Select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.